Welcome to Wraparound the World, where we explore the incredible journey of wraparound from its origins to its global impact. Join us as we delve into personal and community stories, meeting powerful individuals, families, and communities who have been transformed by this powerful approach.
Tracy, it's glad to be back with you, buddy, and starting a new series of episodes for the new year. And we've got a great guest here with us. Do you want to take a minute and welcome to the show?
Well, yes, definitely glad to be here and glad to kind of start with our new series of podcast. And so definitely glad to welcome our guest, Laurie Ellington. Thank you so much for coming and being here, part of this. So,
Yeah, well, I'll say, like, I'm really excited to have you here because the curriculum and the article was written at Davis around neuroscience and wraparound connection, the collective intelligence. I don't just know about it. I have students that brag about it, go into class and say that, like, and long timers, right? So people that know the practice from the basics, maybe intermittent, but like people that, wow, now you take my clinical work or maybe we won't call it that. We'll take our whole person work and connect it all, right, and put it all together.
Yeah.
So I've gotten a lot of raving reviews from it. I haven't personally gone, but yeah, anyway. Yeah.
well, and I'm going to tell you, I before kind of listening and hearing from Jared, I hadn't really, kind of heard or really kind of thought about it in that way. And then as I, kind of listened to him talk about it and did a little more research getting ready for this, I'm going to have to say it was just really intriguing to hear and understand. And I think what I love the most or more intrigued about the most, I want to hear more about is just the interconnectedness of the neuroscience around it
Yeah, you bet.
and how we are all connected. It doesn't separate us being, someone that's being a person that's receiving support and help, or the person that's kind of giving it. And I think, to me, especially with wraparound, that helps to see the connectedness in the work that we do. So yeah, I'm really kind of interested in seeing what that looks like for all of us.
Yeah, we are. I mean, that's what I love about the science. I mean, our
Mhm.
ancient traditions have taught this for centuries, which I bridge those two worlds together,
Right.
But we can't turn away from the modern science that shows the neurobiological and the energetic interconnectedness of us as a family, as mammals, actually. It's, it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, we're not, there's no way to be in isolation. What's going on in these meat suits doesn't stay in these meat suits. You know what I mean?
Mm. Mm.
And even right now, this interaction we're having is impacting our neurochemistry.
Okay.
It's changing it. It's changing our hormone levels, right? It's impacting our physiology in lots of different ways.
Just being on set alone messes with you in a whole bunch of ways.
Yeah.
Let alone the conversation we're about to have.
I know.
If you will just maybe kind of tell us a little bit about you and your work, and just kind of share some interesting stuff about you.
Yeah, maybe we start just origins. Like, how did you end up here?
Wow. A lot of twists and turns and detours and along the way. So maybe just what brought me to wraparound. I could even just start there, and I would say that was my earlier years. Having adversity myself, I got a real high A score. Moved around, didn't know most of my family. I could have used some wraparound when I was a youth, right? And so I think that got me interested, and I know it did, at a really young age about what's the human experience about? I mean, what's the nature of reality here? What are we doing? Like, why do we treat each other this way, good or bad? And what's happening? I was just a very curious kid. And I was in a culture where, those types of questions would have been bizarre to ask. I grew up in the deep South, in the middle of the country.
Okay.
I was just a little poor country girl, moving around from one trailer to another. And so I started looking into just findings, even around the world, started studying texts and things even outside of the religion that I grew up in. Also psychology. I remember just picking up Freud out of the
Mhm.
library. I think I was in the 7th or 8th grade. I was
Mhm.
reading, but I
Wow.
was just drawn,
Intrigued.
Wow.
you
Intrigued.
know, to what's happening. Now, was that all I was doing? No, I was a youth, right? So it wasn't like I was just completely immersed, but I was fascinated at that time. And I remember thinking at a very young age that if I can just give back to the world what I'm not getting here, because it was so painful that I thought, I know how badly this is needed. So I want to dedicate my life to giving other kids what I don't get,
Mhm.
you know. So, I moved into psychotherapy. I was a psychotherapist for many years in private practice. And then from that, I shifted into systems of care, working as a leader, a coach, a consultant, a trainer, providing technical assistance. I worked in a couple of different jurisdictions. I worked out in Arizona, state of Arizona, and also in the DC metro area. And in both of those areas, those systems of care, I did training, technical assistance, and helped roll out wraparound programs.
Mm.
Okay.
I had some
Mm.
good coaches and teachers, let me tell you.
Mm.
Pat Miles.
Mhm.
I'm sure you know who Pat
Mhm.
Miles
Yep.
was.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
The rap guru, in
Yeah.
my opinion,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
You know, uh, Frank Ryder. I don't know if you
Mm.
know Frank Ryder, and probably one of my best coaches and mentors was Jane Callowell, who founded the Family Involvement Center,
Mm.
family ran organization in Phoenix. So, I just really got blessed with some amazing teachers, and it made sense to me from an like ancestral wisdom perspective as well as a scientific perspective, because I'd studied trauma in the neuroscience of human relationships for many years. And I just saw those two worlds coming together. That's what I've been doing, is seeing those two worlds coming together.
Mhm.
And I have a really hard time turning my eyes away from something that has been shared with us for centuries across the globe, that is now being validated in science in multiple disciplines:
Mhm.
neuroscience, epigenetics, mind body research, quantum physics. I mean, multiple disciplines. And so I really look at those intersections and take this consilience approach. And in many ways, wraparound, does
Right.
that
Yeah.
as well.
Mhm.
Right.
So, that's probably a high level of how
Right.
I made my way into the wraparound world. It just makes sense to
Mhm.
me. I actually see it as very old.
Mm.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Um, well, think about just our indigenous cultures, inner circles, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
We've wrapped around people that are suffering and struggling as mammals, not even just humans,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
as mammals. Look at elephants and dolphins.
Mhm.
They're all doing wraparound. They're all pulling each other out of difficult situations and following the principles. They're not giving up,
Mhm.
for example. They're collaborating to do it, right?
Mhm.
Like, I see it as a very ancient
Yeah.
practice that is really embedded in what it means to be a mammal and a human.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
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 It's
You're preaching to the choir. I think it's, well, a friend of ours, Jesus Sandoval in San Diego, talks about, like, he'll show me scripture, right? And like, and not to say and I'm sure I could look in every book, right? And
right.
probably look back in time and see this combination of all, like, community and
Yeah.
healing and
Yeah.
connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. I'm
Yeah.
all for it. Oh yeah.
And I think it's so fascinating as you talk about the intersection and the intersectionality between the physical and the right. And as I was listening to you, then it continues to just kind of spark why aren't we talking about that more collectively, right? And what is that? How can that help us if we start to have these conversations, right? What is it? How can that help us as a workforce? How can it help us as a community, if we learn more about that,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where I'm
Well,
want to
John
understand.
Franz. John Franz talks about relationship, right, and how important that is, and how we're changed with every relationship we come into. But what does it mean to? And I forget who I read it recently. I think it was Father G. Greg Boyle talked about running out of relationships and like what that feels like. And so we're really just parking around this whole idea from like body, mind, soul, being, vibration. What does it mean to show up?
Yeah.
You know, and that's one. I have a number of things I want to talk about
Yeah,
today.
great. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, one of them for sure is like this. Like, we will jump right in, right? Or after you were saying, Tracy's coaching staff,
Yeah.
right? Working in emergency response, right? Dealing with a lot of people in different places can have an impact on you, right? And so we're gonna maybe take it backward. Maybe we'll go backwards now. We'll talk about supporting this people, supporting the people. What do you think is important to know as a staff, maybe a new person coming into this world, or a community, a community starting to real about how they can kind of take care of themselves in that practice, and maybe some real tangible options. What might be some ways they can care for themselves as they get close to the fire?
I think, well, one thing that it's important for us to know, and I really agree with you, Tracy, that we need to understand. I think this at a deeper level, what it means to be human, and how deeply neurobiologically and energetically we are connected. And we're so like co-regulation is a biological imperative,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of the way our nervous systems are wired. I mean, this is an operating system that is really, I know sometimes people think the language I use is bizarre, but I really see it as this internal soft technology, this
Mm-hmm.
suit that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't learned how to operate it just yet, right? And what's the most important thing that any human, really mammal, needs to be able to do is to navigate social.
Mm-hmm.
Not spell, not do math, but navigate the social landscape, because we're an interdependent species and we
Mm-hmm.
need each other for resources. So we come wired as soon as that umbilical cord is cut. We're looking for an extension of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's why that attachment and bonding process is so important. Well, that circuitry in our nervous systems, that's our social engagement circuitry or mammalian caregiving circuitry, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't go away. We still need each other. So co-regulation is still a biological imperative. But what can happen because of the tendency for the stress response, particularly, I mean, here we are running around in a wilderness as humans in a sea of groundlessness. I mean, it can be anxiety provoking for
Right.
all of us,
Sure.
Yeah.
And because of the primal brain, we can get primal. And that's, of course, that's what we see when people have come into a system of care. There have been disruptions in the ability to navigate social because of the betrayal. And I really see them as all complex traumas, attachment wounds,
Mm-hmm.
betrayal and attachment wounds. So if that's the circuitry that's primarily needing support and help, that's actually, I mean, the wraparound or system of care is just a healing nervous system.
Hmm.
And wrap are nervous systems wrapped around a dysregulated nervous system. So they need to be highly regulated and in a healing space in order to learn to loan that nervous system co-regulation over to the person who didn't get it. They actually had the betrayal
Mm-hmm.
and the attachment wounds, and they had mutual or they had co and mutual dysregulation, right? That got wired into the nervous system, trauma, over and over and over again. So here you have this nervous system that didn't get that extension really of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
What they saw of themselves was, depression, anxiety, anger, right? Grief,
Not
loss,
enough.
pain, suffering. And so you have to be this regulated nervous system that really does provide the medicine. The medicine's in the nervous systems. The medicine is not so much in the techniques, and not that I'm not into techniques,
Mm-hmm.
because I am, of course, right? There are certain approaches and treatments and things like that, absolutely, like somatic modalities and stuff like that. However, really, RAP is a relational ecosystem, and it is just nervous systems either providing medicine or poison. There's a beautiful quote by neuroscientist Lisa Feldman, and she says, the best thing for a human is somebody else's nervous system. The worst thing for a human is somebody else's nervous system. That means that you've got to learn self-awareness, self-regulation, self-mastery of your own operating system if you want to do RAP, so that you can show up with those healing molecules that you're going to loan out to that family, right? Are you going to be perfect with it? No. Are you going to rupture a relationship? Of course you are. We're human, right? But you have the awareness, and you know how to pivot and find your center. You know how to reset when you've had biological insults all day long, right? You know how to do that. To keep your prefrontal cortex online, because that's really the loan that the families need, right? Now, what that also means, because we're so neurobiologically interconnected, that we can, through empathy, we can soak up and absorb the trauma. We will map the brain circuits and pathways of the people that we are or in contact
Connected
with,
to.
right? And particularly in a state of empathy. And so one of the things that I was just teaching a class yesterday, I was working with some home visitors and even just teaching them about the challenges with empathy. Of course, it's the glue that holds the human family together. Beautiful, right? Quality, revered for years, and all kinds of traditions. But a slippery slope. And I think this is important for RAP practitioners and leaders to understand. If we stay in empathy in the face of someone suffering, we can wire in those maps and those pathways. We're feeling with them. We're in their shoes because we're so neurobiologically interconnected. It's deeply ingrained in us. Connection is a biological imperative. So we do things like our mirror neuron systems, for example, are helping us with mentalizing and theory of mind. We want to know, what are people thinking? What are their agendas? So we're just deeply interconnected. And when we're with people, if we're not careful, we can get lost in this suffering. And it's an empathic distress fatigue. It is not, and this is going to be really provocative and controversial, but the science is clear from the Max Planck Institute, from neuroscientists, Singer and Klemecki, that it is not, that compassion fatigue does not exist. There is no compassion fatigue.
I've heard other people say it.
Yeah.
And I've other people say that you can't get burned out. And I'm like, that whole idea is about your own ego. And if you're doing the work, like, you show up abundant at work every day because it's not about you. Now, I'm not an expert. Just different things that it makes me think about, like this idea of, like, yeah.
Well, going off some other things that I kind of remember and looking at and thinking about is something about building kind of a stress resilience, or the capacity of being able to do that. So if we're talking and doing the work of understanding it, how can someone kind of show up and do that from a kind of neuroscience way, right? Scientifically, how does that work then for us?
So many practical tools, right, that have been explored from our ancients for centuries. I highly recommend some kind of a meditation or mindfulness practice. And that's just to take care of your attention networks in your prefrontal cortex, right? But also to cultivate that self-awareness and the interoception. Interoception.
I don't think I know that word.
Yeah, it's inner knowing. So knowing what's going on inside of me, sensations and things like that. I think that's one of the most important skills that somebody working in wraparound could cultivate, because you need to know when you're sitting with somebody or you're facilitating a team meeting or whatever it might be doing an intake, whatever it might be doing. and your heart rate's increasing and your jaw is clenching and your pelvic floor is gripping and you're gripping your fist. That means you're moving into sympathetic nervous system mobilization. That is a fight or flight state. Your social engagement system goes offline.
Right.
Your mammalian caregiving system doesn't run through the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. Your vagal tone is decreased. And over time, continuously experiencing those biological insults and getting into sympathetic activation and not knowing it, it's like our ancestors when they left the cave to go, get food, right? And they had to have sympathetic activation to slay a saber-tooth tiger or whatever. But what did they do? They went back into the cave, they rested, they cooked, and they napped. We're not back in the cave. So you need to know how that's impacting your operating system throughout the day. You need that level of awareness. And then you need tools to reset or even recalibrate right in the moment. When you find yourself going way off center, to be able to know that, okay, I need to drop my shoulders out of my ears. I need to loosen my jaw. I need to smooth out my forehead right now, right? I need to breathe right through my heart and slow my breathing down to maybe about 6 breaths per minute. That's science-backed. These are the things I need to unclench my fists, right? Yeah. Unless somebody's putting a gun to my head, and then that's different. Yeah. No, that's when you need the adrenaline and the cortisol. But over time, you're going to fry. So knowing these little techniques, and there's some beautiful neurosomatic tools that we can use, even having some type of a ritual in between sessions with families, right? Even just for a couple of minutes. Breath work, there's multiple forms of breath work that I think should be taught to practitioners and leaders. Somatic tools that we can use. I mean, I've worked with child welfare leaders, and a lot of the child welfare folks that I've worked with, they actually have yoga mats now by their desks. And they may not be doing a 60 or 90-minute yoga session, but they may just drop down into child's pose or legs up the wall. Those are the two that I teach the most. They're pretty accessible, even for 3 to 5 minutes, right?
Maybe we'll have to do something before she's out of here, Tracy.
Yeah.
We'll have to get me and Tracy up with legs up the...
Yeah, legs up the wall.
Well,
Gratitude practice.
Oh, yeah. That lands really well for me.
Yes. Yeah. Every day for me.
All the time.
Every morning. At least 7 to 10 things. And I pair that with my purpose. Because purpose is also anti-inflammatory. When you know what your purpose is, your why you get up out of bed every morning, connecting to that every single day, it's associated with living up to 7 to 10 years longer.
What I love about this is the science behind it, right? I've heard people say that alignment, just kind of makes you feel better, but, it seems as if it's anecdotal. What I love is hearing, that the actual science behind what you're saying. And when you speak about it's really actually building an actual capacity around having an understanding that I am doing this because I'm building a resilience for managing, kind of the stress. And I think when people, when you hear something and it's like, oh, it's just another thing to do, but no, this is everything that you're talking about. You talk about having evidence. There's science behind this, which is really, I think, really powerful. And I can tell even when we do trainings or other meetings, that there's a real shift in the energy in the room, whether it's virtual or in a physical space, when we do things like that. And so I just love hearing what you're saying and understanding that I can definitely understand that there's science behind it. So
Tracy, there's science behind that feeling that you feel in a room. It's in the research of social coherence that's been done a lot by HeartMath Institute. We can measure internal physiological coherence. That's when we're in alignment. That's a state of optimal functioning. I teach a lot of social workers skills for activating a state of coherence in their body, because that's when we're at our most intelligent. That's when we can connect with people, when we can get into flow, right? But now, and we can measure that, connected to vagal tone and heart rate variability. It's actually a measurable state, published in over 400 different articles. I'm doing my doctorate thesis on it right now with child welfare leaders. Yeah, you can use biofeedback devices to even measure that state inside your body. Why aren't we teaching this, you know? But now the technology is so advanced that we can measure it between us. And there's science showing that we can be socially incoherent where there's dissonance, right? Not resonance, that dissonance. And that's the stress response. That's the upregulation of the physiological stress response and the shutting down of the prefrontal cortex, which is needed to do the work. I think when you realize that, you see that it's really important to pay attention to how we're treating each other. We don't want to be activating pain networks, right? Which is with social pain. We now know from the research at UCLA, I don't know if you know the work of Eisenberger and Matt Lieberman, but they were pioneers in discovering that social pain or emotional pain activates the same circuitry in the brain as physical pain. So when we feel ostracized, neglected in some way, things aren't fair, you know, we're in the out group. I tie all of this to neuroscience, particularly the social neuroscience research. Then what happens is our pain pathways are activated. I mean, no different than if somebody's just clubbing you.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's important to know.
Feel it.
You can feel it. We've always felt it.
Right.
You can cut the air with a knife sometimes when
Right.
you go into a room, or there's a feeling of like lightness and, you know, connection and community and freedom, right?